I am joined today by reoccurring guest host Reese Taylor. Thanks for being on the show.
No
And
problem.
our special guest today is filmmaker Justin Main. Justin, thanks for being on.
How's it going? Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, I got to watch this film you made called Crow, which is inspired by the Crow show, and it's only available on YouTube. And I thought it was really great. I wanted to have you on. Let's talk about it. The Crow's on everybody's mind. So can you kind of just walk us through, a little bit of your origin story? What led you to wanting to create this, feature-long fan fiction Crow movie?
Yeah, sure. If my cat Nala will allow me to do that because she's trying to hog the camera.
Oh, fur babies are always welcome on the show.
She's trying to be the star of the show, Nala. All right, fine, sure. Anyways, to answer your question, I've been in the filmmaking space for about roughly 10 years this year, actually. I got into acting professionally in 2004. I had the lovely opportunity of being a part of Jurassic World and enjoyed the experience so much that when I came back to Michigan after shooting in Louisiana, I wanted to hit the ground running like full force. I had a background in professional wrestling, and prior to that, I actually tried to break into acting and modeling when I was 16.
Okay.
But I never really thought of it as a career option until I was a bit older. But when I came back to Michigan, I literally hit the ground running. I sought out agents, I sought out headshots, just filling in my resume, doing whatever work I could find, whether it was commercials or short films or just anything. Background, I was just doing whatever I could, making connections. And over the course of those years, I made a lot of friends and I'm sure a couple of enemies, but it is what it is in this type of space, right? And in filmmaking, you kind of have, to me, I really feel like you become a stronger filmmaker as you start getting onto more and more sets. You start seeing how everything kind of operates on a technical level. I mean, obviously you make friends and you kind of pick their brain a little bit, but as I was developing more as a filmmaker as well as an actor, I started wanting to kind of I noticed one thing. I noticed that a lot of Michigan filmmakers, there's like a ton of talent in this pool and not a whole lot of it was getting featured on a broader scale. We had opportunities to where, something like Dylan Side's The Mask, that went viral. And I saw something like that. I'm like, man, what if we just have like more projects like that? Hollywood not coming in and filming stuff here, but we need stuff on like an independent level that breaks out. That's when I started talking with Dylan and I came up with the idea. I'm like, man, what property would be like just, I think what would be doable, but what would help us stand out? Like, what could we use to, feature a lot of filmmakers from this area? And then it popped into my brain. I'm a huge fan of The Crow. Huge fan. Huge fan. And throughout the years, if you know anything about like what's been going on with the remakes, they've just been, for one reason or another, just falling through. Like, you had Bradley Cooper attached, you had Jason Momoa attached, you had Luke Evans attached, you had Tom Hiddleston. There's like all these A-list actors and A-list filmmakers that were supposed to make the remake, and just nothing happened. So I was like, you know what? I may not have the same type of budget. I don't have the same type of connections. I'm not going to be taken as seriously as, some of these remake potentials. But you know what? I'm just going to put something out there to give Crow fans something to watch, something that they can enjoy, something that's made by a fan, not by a studio, and B, something that can showcase Michigan filmmakers on a broader scale and show what we can actually do if given the right material and the right opportunities. And that's when we went into production in 2000 and 2000.
That's awesome. So this initially was supposed to be a short, right?
Yes.
So did you get, you crowdfunded, or how did you...
Brought it out of my own pocket.
Wow. So where's the leap there from I'm going to spend budget just for a short to we're going full feature? Because that's a commitment.
Yeah. So I hired Melinda Doan Bryce. We had a meeting at a coffee shop back in 2009, and I kind of spitballed my ideas to her, and I told her I have these ideas for a unique storyline set within the Crow universe. I didn't want to do a remake. I didn't want to feature any existing characters. I just wanted to tell a story set within that universe that wasn't told already. I'd seen all the films, TV show, all the comics. I'd watched every single fan film that the Crows ever had, and I'm thinking nobody's featuring some of these ideas now. Not to say that somebody had these concepts locked up and they just hadn't featured them yet, but I wanted to be, the first one to actually deep dive and explore them. So I hired Melinda, told her my ideas, and originally it started off as a 15-minute short, and then as we went through revisions, we kept adding more and more scenes, and eventually we got up to about, 30 minutes. We were collaborating pretty heavily on the script, and then when we had a locked-in shooting version, I think it was at roughly about 34 pages. And we went through the casting process, we went through pre-production, we had literally literally everything mapped out, incredibly mapped out. I mean, like from top to bottom. Our pre-production process was very key to what had happened during the course of the rest of the film. We had shot selections mapped out way in advance. We had literally a strategy going into every single location. It wasn't like a, I call it guerrilla filmmaking where you just go to the location and just shoot whatever. We had everything mapped out. And like we would have pre-production meetings that would last like 3 to 4 hours just to get all this stuff locked in. And then we found out as we were getting onto set and shooting that we were so ahead of schedule that we were actually getting more shots in, and we're getting every single one of the shots we had already planned. Unless something technical was the issue, we were getting everything we needed. So we just started shooting extra. And we were running with takes. We were taking longer on the takes. We weren't cutting immediately after the take was done. We were holding on to shots and whatnot.
Okay.
And when we went into post-production and we reviewed the footage, we realized we had a ton of extra footage. And then we came up with this concept of, okay, well, this film as it stands right now is going to be roughly about 45, 50 minutes. Why not just try to go an hour and a half? So we're trying to think like, okay, is there a way we can stretch this out and make it to where it won't feel like filler, but it can tell a more thorough story? And that's when Matt Zakel, the director, came up with the idea of featuring the voices in the film. And that was a whole other thank you. That was a whole other element that just took this film to like the next level, because if you actually read the comics, there are voices, there are crows that are talking to Eric Draven, and especially like the first comic, but in the subsequent comics after that, there are voices talking to the main character. And it hasn't been done on a film level yet because they couldn't quite figure it out how to do it and make it make sense. So we decided to go in that direction, and that's where the full story got fleshed out. Ironically enough, we actually had 2 scripts during filmmaking. We had the script during production, and then we had the voices script in post-production. So we had to go, yeah.
I gotta tell you, what I was really impressed with was the fact that, one, you had a non-linear narrative script, right? So the film is using flashbacks and then almost an unreliable narrator trying to figure out what happened to him, what happened to the love of his life. So that was enthralling. The script that she wrote is so character-based that you're really following the journey of Dean, which I thought was fantastic. And then your director brought such an artistic visual sense to it. And I hate to spoil it, but in the beginning, he sees these 2 shadows of people and they're silhouettes, right? And their glasses are shining bright. And I was like, wow, that's so stark, so stunning, and so visually compelling. And then later on in the story, we see why. I was like, oh my God, it's really good filmmaking.
But there's something I actually want to touch on that you said earlier, because you talk a lot about how with Michigan filmmakers in particular, you're trying to, I'm not going to say a disconnect with the rest of the world and us, but there's a certain something here that you don't find anywhere else. Could you kind of go into the process of how you wanted to incorporate Michigan into it and how this area had a different meaning to it, as opposed to somewhere like Los Angeles or, as you said before, Louisiana?
Sure. So a couple of things. I always felt just being in kind of like the middle of this community that there is a inherent chip on our shoulder. Everybody here kind of just wants to do the best that they can. They want to be recognized, obviously, for the work. Who doesn't? But it's different in Michigan, to where, especially with what had happened with the tax incentives, and it left a lot of people high and dry, and it left a lot of younger filmmakers, because I came in after the film incentives. I had literally come in right after the film incentives were pulled, and I never had the opportunity to work on some of those bigger budget, films and TV shows. I never got a chance to audition for them. I never, I missed my window. And I feel like a lot of filmmakers on the other side of the camera probably felt very similar. Like it inspired, cinematographers and gaffers and writers and directors, editors, grips. It inspired a large community of people that wanted to be a part of that community, but didn't get really a chance to because there's nothing here. And as the well dried up and as there was less and less work, it started becoming more and more independent, more and more short film based, more and more commercial based, industrial. And while that's fine enough to pay the bills, nothing was really scratching that hunger of being able to tell something on a larger scale, to be able to show what the talent can do if given the opportunity. And when I went into putting together Crow, we had the options of pulling in talent from Ohio and Chicago. Like we had people auditioning from LA, and
Wow.
it was I think altogether we had like 6 submissions roughly, which I thought was absurd for a fan film. I was like, why? Like,
That's
is there that
incredible.
much interest in this film, right? So, I mean, we auditioned everybody. I literally watched everybody's audition tape. There was not anybody I missed. And when it came down to the nitty gritty of it, like it was all Michigan actors that we cast, because it wasn't just because they were from Michigan. It was because they were the best choices. And it told me a lot. I'm like, man, just like somebody like a Peter Poulos, for example, who was the cinematographer on the project. He's the guy who literally set up a lot of the shots that we have. You can't tell me with the way he shot Crow that he took what was essentially a 10th budgeted film and then made it look like $1 million.
Oh, it's incredible. It's an incredible film.
I'm not even joking when I say this. When we released the film, we released the trailer first a year prior to the film actually coming out. There were people who thought it was a legitimate studio film.
Yeah.
I'm not bragging about that. That is the
No,
case.
it's
You can
true.
go through you can go through the comments. People thought it was the Skarsgård film before the Skarsgård film was even announced, and I think it says a lot about the talent that we had, because if we didn't have that talent, we didn't have the collaborative efforts between everybody on staff, it wouldn't have turned out the way it did. And I think that's a huge accomplishment for a lot of our filmmakers in this area. So I think when we have more stuff coming into the state, we have more budgets coming into the state, more investors, people who understand that Michigan has this pool of filmmakers that can do great work if given the opportunity. I think it's only going to elevate and escalate what we already have here. We don't need to pull in people from out of state. I really, truly believe that. It's getting the rest of the filmmaking community here to understand that as well, and to believe in that. And I think that's going to be the hardest part, is understanding that we need to work together cohesively as opposed to segregated. And that's a problem I'm seeing. Once we can handle that issue, this clicking that I'm seeing around the state, we can handle that and start working together cohesively. There's no reason why the state can't succeed. Like, period. There's no
I
reason.
love that. I think there is a zero-sum game mentality. It's me versus you instead of us building up the community. And I think you're right. A lot of that is, from my opinion, just getting that ego out of the way. The rising tide raises all boats, right? So
Right.
I don't see why we can't all get that together. But I love the fact that, you're championing local Michigan filmmakers. It really is. I mean, I'm watching this thing, I'm like, this is a feature-length indie film on YouTube, and there's so much risk. Like, you're not making any money on this thing.
I lost money. I did nothing but lose money on that project. And that was always the intent. I never wanted to make money on that project. I just wanted to showcase a good story with good filmmakers. That was it. Period. You could say the concept was my baby, but this film isn't my baby. It's everybody's baby. Like, I made this for everybody. Like, I want, Peter to use this on his reel. I want Matt to use this on his reel. I want Callie and Bobby and everybody who was involved to be proud of this project and put it forth, and to use it as real material to showcase what they can do, so they can get those high-paying projects that come into the state or even out of state. That was always the intent. It was never to individually solely profit off of it. Like, I still to this day have not made 1 cent off of that film, and I don't personally want to. All I wanted to do was tell a good story and help others. I wanted to be a collaborator and make this, what was originally my baby, everybody's.
I'm like a pure passion project. And right now with the new remake coming out, the director of the original Crow, he's like, I really don't want to see my movie remade. So did you find yourself, before you kind of launched into making this feature, did you reach out to any of the old creators and see if you can get like a blessing to make this? Or you're like, I'm just going to do it?
So, funny story about that. I wanted to, and that was totally the intent. I had no idea how to go about doing it. I didn't have any connections. I didn't have anybody that knew James O'Barr personally. I had heard Alex Proyas has a Facebook, but I didn't know how to find it.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to contact Shannon Lee, who is like one of the few surviving people that knew Brandon Lee personally. So I didn't really have those connections to contact them. So it wasn't until after we released the teaser trailer in September 2020 that we put it online, and I received a a message on the Crow Instagram page that we, or not Instagram, but Facebook page that we had.
Yeah.
And I look at the message, it says James on there, and I'm like, oh, that can't be like James O'Barr.
That's awesome.
And I showed it to a comic book friend of mine who draws comics, and he apparently knew James O'Barr. And I'm like, is this who I think it is? He's like, yeah, that's who you think it is. That's James O'Barr. And in that message, he said, very intrigued, looking forward to seeing more.
That's awesome.
And then we released the official trailer in May 2000. And then I sent it to him, and he commented that it looks very good. It looks very good. I'm proud of what you guys are putting together. Looking forward to seeing the finished product.
Oh,
And
that's fantastic.
I started crying. I'm not even joking. Like, that's like, imagine if you're putting together a Spider-Man fan film and Stan Lee saw it and he was like, hey, like, James O'Barr is my Stan Lee. So it was that the film could have bombed completely in terms of views, and I still would have been happy with just that. Like, personally, that was huge. Because he didn't have to reach out. He didn't have to send us anything. He didn't have to say anything. He didn't even have to share the trailer. He shared the trailer. And to me, like, that's such a huge thing, especially after, I mean, I don't know if you've watched like the sequels or the TV show or anything like that, but The Crow has a history of not so good like films that have come out. So for him to have faith and belief in a film like ours that isn't even official, that was huge. That was huge.
Looking at your Crow kind of outfit, were you going for a little bit of a Skull Cowboy feel?
You got it.
Okay, I just wanted to check. I was getting that inspiration there.
Mm-hmm. This whole film is peppered with Easter eggs. Like, awesome. I mean, all over the place. If you know where to look, you'll find them. That's why we try to reward viewers for like subsequent viewings, because there's stuff that like it's pretty obvious, and then there's stuff that's like very minimal. There's nothing in Crow that doesn't have a logical connection to something else in the film or something else in the franchise. Every single thing has an explanation for it.
One thing I have to say, I admire the amount of passion that you had into the film. Again, I loved it. I always made sure I shared it whenever I had the possibility. But I have to ask you in particular, like with the way you developed the story, what was your big personal connection to some of the material that you said that hasn't been used? What was the thing that stood out the most to you that hasn't been used that connected to you?
Well, we're going to enter into spoiler territory. So I gotta be careful with what I say here for people who haven't seen the film. There's a few things there that I really wanted to play with the concept of. The one that I feel I can explain without spoiling anything is probably two. One is how the villains, the antagonists, are handled. You see this not even in just Crow films, but you see it nowadays in like every single like film coming out where there's a protagonist and an antagonist. There is no fleshed out backstory for the antagonists. There's no humanity, right? There's no concept of right, wrong. There's no gray area. And one thing that I made a strong point of, not only with Melinda, but with Matt and everybody else, in any film that I make, Crow included, I don't want this black and white type of feeling. I want a gray area. Everything has a gray area. And when you play with the concept of a gray area, you're just playing with a shade of it. So if you watch like the guys in our movie, some are worse than others, but this is a huge compliment to the actors involved. You can see them playing with their humanity. You can see them thinking about decisions that they've made and the situation that they're in. They're not just gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna go out and kill the guy. They're scared. They're scared shitless. You know what I mean? Like, there's guys that are like breaking themselves down over the course of the film over the decisions that they made earlier, questioning motives and stuff like that. And you don't really get to see that in a lot of film, let alone just Crow movies. And I think that was like, and again, this is coming from a huge Crow fan. Like, I'm not trying to look at this from any other perspective other than, you know, a filmmaker and as a fan. If you look at some of the villain archetypes in the Crow franchise, they're very cardboard. They're very like one-dimensional, like this is your paper, this is the thickness of it, right? And I wanted to have a little bit more meat on the bones for the antagonist to play with, because ultimately at the end of the day, The Crow isn't a story about a guy getting revenge because he was murdered or he was wronged. It's a guy understanding and processing processing grief.
Yeah.
And how he goes about doing that. That has always been a theme, that has always been a concept, and that was no different for Crow. Crow is just the different themes of grief. If you watch it, you can find every single part of grief, the actual journey of it in this film. And you watch Dean as he's going through that, how he handles every single antagonist that he comes across, how he handles the entire situation in of itself. After he handles the revelation at the end, and what he goes through in that moment when he learns of that revelation. That's what makes a tragedy a tragedy. It's not just the situation itself, it's the understanding of the concept of it. And that was something that I really wanted to play with. And then the second thing was really just understanding that you could tell this story in a non-linear fashion and being able, thank you, and then being able to take the viewer on the same journey as the lead character. I think the closest a Crow movie has come to doing that was The Crow Salvation, and that we took that as a little bit of inspiration. But I really wanted to play with the non-linear storytelling and make it more of a kind of like a mystery noir type of feeling, as opposed to just a straight out action or horror based film.
Okay, so
it's a smart script.
I was gonna say though, like when you talk more about the film noirs, because that's one of my favorite genres, was there any specific film outside of The Crow that you look for inspiration for that?
It depends on who you ask. If you ask me, Memento was a big one. Memento for sure. Obviously the Crow films, that's always been a big thing. I love Collateral with Tom Cruise and Jamie, so good. Jamie Foxx? Jamie Foxx. That was a great film. Oh boy, I'm trying to refer back to it. There are other ones, like if you were to ask like Matt Zakel, like his was Don't Look Now, The Cranes Are Flying, The Silence of the Lambs, You Were Never Really Here with Joaquin Phoenix. He had a few others as well, but like it really depends on who you ask, because that's where you're gonna find out like where their influences came from. Like a lot of those extreme close-ups that we use in the film were heavily inspired by Silence of the Lambs. But I think it's genius storytelling because it puts you in an uncomfortable position, having to stare into the faces of what is essentially either death or sadness or tragedy, and you can't look away. When they're center frame, right looking at you, you can't look away. And it forces you to kind of sit in that moment with the character. And that was one of my favorite things about the entire film, was that we were able to do that and play around with that. We took a lot of risks on this film, like a ton.
All right,
but
so
I think they paid off.
You've got 400 views on YouTube. You put your own money at risk to make this thing happen. You're putting faith in local filmmakers and talent, and it showed. Did you have any, and you got praise from the creators, so did you get any opportunities, any fruit that you got to take advantage of from this success of this, fan film?
So here's the funny thing.
Okay.
Everybody else did except for me.
What?
Yeah.
So
I kept tabs.
Wow.
I kept tabs on everything. Like I watch. I'm very observant when it comes to what happens in the area and what's going on. I noticed a lot of the crew, a lot of the filmmakers started working on each other's projects. They started getting hired in for other projects. Peter is working on a lot of Detroit films right now. He blew up as a cinematographer after this came out. Callie was already getting booked quite a bit, but she blew up like very heavily after this. Same thing with Bobby Lane, and same thing with Dan Keary, same thing with Dan Pesta especially. Dan Schmidt moved to LA. Matt directed another few films. He got requested to edit and direct as well. I mean, you name them, like everybody started getting a lot of work. On the other hand, from this film, and I don't want to just say it from like agents or my manager or anything like that, because I've done work since then, but I would say out of everybody who's kind of profited off of this film, I have probably profited the least. And I'm okay with it. Because again, this wasn't about me. This project was about everybody who was involved. And as long as they were able to get work and to get notoriety and to be able to expand and further their career, that's all I care about. The last thing I want to do is, make it all about me and make it about a starring vehicle for me and launch me like that. That was never the intent. Like you said earlier, a rising tide raises all ships. And I firmly believe that. I said that many times on set. I said that many times in post-production. I said that many times in pre-production. I say that all the time. I say that almost on a daily basis because I firmly believe in it, and it's a very true statement. What is the point of elevating your own career when you're not bringing others with you?
Yeah. Wow.
Personally.
A selfless endeavor, and your humility is admirable, but I feel that big things are coming. I mean, you put this whole thing together, you starred in it, you did a hell of a job in this film. I mean, it didn't feel like, how you watch that indie film and you're like, oof, I never got the ick, as the kids say.
I
So,
appreciate that. That,
yeah,
that means a
I
lot.
think big things are coming, no question. So, is there anything I didn't ask you that I should have before I let you go?
Actually, I got a question for you.
Yeah,
What do you guys think of the remake trailer?
I have not watched it.
Mm.
Okay,
Reese,
here's what I'll say about it. I'm not
it's
going to go the
on.
direction you think I'm going. I
Okay.
promise you. When I first saw it, I just said, okay, looks like it should be good. I'm not the type of person to judge something off of the trailer because I've seen some movies where the trailer's amazing and the film sucked, or vice versa. And with me, I'm just like, okay, can you tell a good story? That's really all I care about as a viewer. Can I be entertained for an hour and a half? And I saw the amount of hatred that came to the trailer, and I'm just thinking, it's let the story be told. Don't judge a book by its cover. Actually know what's in between the pages.
Right.
I am purposely avoiding it because of how much I'm seeing online. I will watch the movie. I really don't want to see that character's story retold because the Crow, like you did, could be an original character, just like all the sequels and the spin-offs they did. So I'm not sure why they didn't just say, hey, let's just do a new character instead of rebooting Eric. But those aren't decisions that I get to make. They make them and they have to live with them. So I'm purposely avoiding it so that I can give the film a chance, even though I was like, why are we doing this? So yeah, that's where we're at, and we'll let you know.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah,
Especially after watching Crow. I'm just curious.